Welcome to our Thrillworks second of 2021 Trade Talk. This one's all about e-commerce, and we've assembled a fantastic group of panelists today. My name is Doug Riches. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Thrillworks, and I'm going to be kind of guiding us through the conversation. So before we get started, I wanted to give everyone a little bit of a flavor of where are we at with e-commerce today? What does it look like kind of in the industry, and kind of shape a little bit of what we're gonna be talking about. So there's an ancient proverb that, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. It really, the same goes for e-commerce, whether you've been doing and selling digitally online for years, or whether, this is your first foray into it. There's no better time than the present, really, to start to get into embracing what really has become the new way that people are shopping and selling. So again, I love, boring people with statistics. So here we go. But we've got this graph represents kind of the growth from 2019 and projected growth into 2024 of e-commerce. When we look at, the trend that was already happening, previous to the pandemic, where a lot of people were forced online, a lot of people who might not have made that leap into digital yet, we're really starting to do that. You can see there's like a significant kind of uptick that's going to happen. We see in 2021 the amount of change is going down, and the total retail sales kind of go back up. So it's interesting to see kind of where is e-commerce going, not just now, but where is it going in the future? And I think, what you'll start to see as we talk with all these panelists is that, e-commerce is something that, was on the way up at the beginning of the pandemic and will continue to do so over time. And it's not just about the US and Canada. One of the things that you'll see kind of very obviously from this graph is that in Asia they're kind of well ahead of us in the e-commerce space. So when you look at kind of a global e-commerce perspective, not just North America, you're going to see that China dwarfs almost every other country. If you add them up, I don't even think it adds up to the same amount total. So each of these numbers is rapidly growing, including China, but countries like Canada, countries like the United States, those numbers are also rapidly advancing. And some other interesting things that we're starting to see too. Back in 2016 or so, we started to hit an inflection point with mobile, and where is that traffic coming from? How are people shopping? And so mobile commerce in 2016 was about 52%. The projected number in 2021 is 72%. So we can definitely see that growth to the point where, when is that going to slow down? This is something that maybe we'll, touch on a little bit. Especially if you've come into e-commerce over the course of 2020, it's something that you were either forced to do or was on your roadmap anyway. One of the things that people are starting to see is it's not like the movie Field of Dreams. It's not build it and they will come. And so when you do have your experience, you really need to keep them kind of interested. And so one of the things the panelists are going to talk about is not just what are some of the best practices or strategies, but really how do you get and keep people coming to your experience and returning over time. And that can take a lot of different kind of forms. So we've got a vast amount of tools. When we think about e-commerce, traditionally, you've got your cart and you've got your product pages and all that fun stuff. But e-commerce in 2021, there's a lot more tools available to us. And again, there's no way in an hour that we're going to get through talking about all of these. But these are some of the considerations that you need to start looking at, whether it's personalization, which we'll touch on today, whether it's things like search or headless or customer care and support or interaction with retail. There's always more that you can be doing to really enhance that customer experience. Some of the other things that we're going to be talking about, again, I mentioned personalization. So personalization can have a really deep impact on how successful your e-commerce experiences are. So if you have like a lower level of personalization versus high, you can see, on the first graph here that we've got, like 110% kind of increase. The value of the average order goes up. And then, again, the net promoter scores, I would recommend this brand to others also starts to go up because customers start to feel like, this brand understands me. This brand is something that kind of gets who I am. As well as recommendations. So personalization recommendations, two sides of the same coin. So when you look at recommendations, kind of across the board, we also want to make sure we're focusing on that. So this is also something that we're going to talk with the panelists about today. And it's not just about B2C. It's not just about kind of the brick and mortar stores, going to the mall or whatever that experience might be. It's also about kind of B2B sales. There's a recent Forrester report that came out that, really shows a strong preference for frictionless self-serve experiences for B2B customers as well as B2C. And so if you're in the B2B space, again, having those right tooling in place, but some of the challenges can be slightly different. So again, we'll touch on that as well a little bit with the panel. So overall, really, then again, the panelists will go through all this, but what's the key to a great e-commerce experience? It's frictionless, it's conversational, and we've got a great sense of fulfillment. So I know when I'm going to be ordering something that I can rely that it's going to show up in a reasonable amount of time, that I've had that great experience. Obviously, in an hour, we're not going to cover all of these things in great depth, but if there are questions towards the end that you do have for the panelists, we will have opportunity to ask questions to them at that point. And so with that, everybody's probably, that's enough of Doug talking. Let's get the experts on the line here. I'm going to turn off the slides and we're just going to have a great conversation with these folks. So here we go. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for taking time today to meet with us. I'm just going to go around the room a little bit and just get you to introduce yourself and your company and what you do. So Brad, why don't we start with you?
Great. Thanks, Doug. So I'm Brad. I'm the CMO at Stawall Commerce, and Stawall Commerce is a headless commerce platform. We've been around since 2010 for anybody who hasn't heard of us. And we specialize in really helping marketing teams, technology teams build out storefronts that really are due to help support their growth going forward. So if it B2B, B2C, anybody who's doing anything that's a little bit more complicated wants to do some of the things that Doug just mentioned, like personalization and reduce friction and build out better customer portals, we're a good fit for those types of stores.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. I'll turn it over to Michael next. You're on mute, Michael.
There always has to be somebody.
There always has to be somebody, yeah.
Thanks, Doug. I'm Michael Tamblyn. I'm CEO of Rakuten Kobo. We sell ebooks and e-readers around the world. So we have about more than 40 million customers across 25 countries where we're in partnership with bricks and mortar book brands, whether that be Indigo in Canada, WH Smith in the UK, Fnac in France, and just about everywhere else. My coworker's just joining me there. And so we straddle this really interesting place between e-commerce, collaboration with physical retail, mobile experiences in apps, but also designing and manufacturing our own hardware for readers. So it's kind of full stack in a bunch of different directions, sitting on top of a catalog of almost 7 million books in about 92 languages. that we then serve to 150 countries every week. So we kind of get into all of the bits and pieces of not just e-commerce, but also subscription services and hybrid hardware and software experiences too.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. And I just subscribed to your new subscription service. It's awesome. So,
oh, fantastic. Thank you.
Scott, you're up next.
Thanks, Doug. My name is Scott Rademaker, independent consultant. I do not have 40 million clients. I have only one client at one time because I specialize in digital transformation and e-commerce. And whether that's bringing a company into the present day and even obviously future-proofing that technology. And it, when I walk into a company, I get the, sort of the general view and then look at, okay, what are the pain points and how are we going to deliver the best in class customer experience, and then work backwards from there. And so in my experience, not just as an engineer, but I leverage that experience when I come to a company and start to provide some solution. Now, what I like to do and sort of look for are really good solution providers that work well with these particular legacy systems or provide a brand new experience or overhaul of what their system looks like today. And in this instance, I've worked with Brad at Stawall a couple of times at different companies, both as an employee and as a consultant. And so continue to always want to evolve and learn about e-commerce. So even for me, just being on this panel, I will learn from everyone else as well. So thank you for having me.
Oh, more than welcome. It's great to have you. Thank you. And last but definitely not least, we've got Rodney.
Hi, Douglas. Thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to participate with these expert minds. So really excited. So I'm Rodney Rodriguez. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer with Zoovu. But over the past 15 years, I've been leading digital strategy for world-leading brands like Bell, Whirlpool, BlackBerry. But in my role here at Zoovu, I lead the business strategy, working closely with our product teams and influencing the roadmap, working closely with our marketing teams in our positioning and our messaging, and then also working closely with our enablement teams and customer success to really understand the needs of our customers. And Zoovu, what we do, we're a conversational search platform that ultimately helps enterprise businesses help their customers find the content and the information that they're looking for, all with a human touch, right? So with our platform, we pride ourselves in engaging customers with the natural, conversations to really understand their needs, the context, so that we could then educate them, show them the possibilities of all the options available to them in a very simplistic way, so that we can eventually, make them feel empowered so that they can make the right decision, in finding the right product or finding the right support content that they need.
That's awesome. And thank you, Rodney. I think that's key. And I think, if we're going to jump into, some of the questions here that I have for the panel, like I mentioned, in my preamble, there's been a definite increase in the prevalence of e-commerce, just throughout 2020. Obviously, I think most of us have had to do some sort of curbside pickup or online order, and a lot of companies were forced to either adopt or change their plans pretty rapidly. How do you, because of that increased competition, more and more people are selling online, et cetera. How do you make sure that people are coming to your experience? And maybe I'll start with Michael in particular. Say, how does that interplay of brick and mortar and partnerships affect your strategy?
Yeah, it's a great question. For us, one of the reasons that we started working with traditional bricks and mortar was precisely to get out of some of the traditional customer acquisition funnels that people find themselves in. Now, ebooks are a low margin business, and e-readers aren't especially high margin either. And I think one of the challenges that people find in e-commerce today is that it isn't enough to come up with a good idea or a good product idea. You have to come up with an idea that has enough margin in it to pay the Google tax and the Facebook tax and still have a business on the other side if online acquisition is your primary way of getting customers. We knew that we couldn't do that. So for us, it was looking for where those pools of high value customers are so that we could then bring them in, turn them into digital customers. And that meant creating alliances with bricks and mortar book retailers, all of whom were struggling with that question of how do I provide a digital experience to my traditional physical customers? And fortunately, they all had an Amazon or an Apple or a Google looming on their doorstep as we went out to do this. So there was some strong strategic impetus to have them make that jump. But at the same time, it was a really good alignment of needs. We needed to be able to find those customers. They needed a service that they could wrap around them so that they could preserve their relationship with those customers. And that created the symbiosis that we needed to build a pretty good business.
That's great. So you really kind of like you went where they were versus like, again, like build it and they will come, like I was talking about. Like you went to where they were and really started to change the conversation in those brick and mortar stores. If I was to like repeat that back to you. Yeah. That's fantastic. We mentioned you mentioned like Amazon, and that this is an interesting one, and maybe kind of Michael and maybe Rodney or any of the panelists. What about Amazon versus direct to consumer? Like the Amazon is out there; it's the largest kind of like e-commerce retailer there is. How do you play in that space? Do you just sell on Amazon maybe if you have like a more physical product, or how do you manage that kind of that conflict between wanting to go direct yourself and have your brand represented, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so if I could take a quick stab, and Michael, I definitely agree with your sentiment around going to where the customer's already at. When you think about D2C brands, and especially with the pandemic, with everyone trying to get online, that obviously created a lot of noise in the space just because consumers were now overwhelmed with more choice. But the thing is, with a D2C brand, they might not have the experience, right, of creating a good website experience for customers, right? And obviously they don't have the equity of traffic, right? So I don't think it's either or D2C versus marketplaces. It's about finding the right combination, because if you do get your product on a marketplace like Amazon or a Walmart, like their traffic is enormous. And although you're kind of in a sea of other competing products, you're still going to get the traffic and the eyeballs, which is really hard to build if you're starting ground up. We have a customer, a very fast growing supplements company, that has built their D2C channel, and a lot of their advertising efforts does go to their D2C own website, just because the cost of acquisition is much cheaper, but they still, make that presence strong in the Walmarts and the Amazons because of the eyeballs and the traffic, right? Because that's where customers are already going. I always think that, when you're shopping, you either have a brand affinity, or so you might just go straight to the brand, or you might have just a random category need. And that's where Amazon comes into place. Because if I don't, if I just know I need like a certain, product just to fulfill some whatever need, chances are Amazon will have it. But the net is just finding that right balance between, how much you invest with your D2C and partnerships with other channels.
But doesn't that really play into your brand too? If you really think about it, you don't want to cannibalize your own brand over sending somebody else over to the third-party marketplace. For me, just recently, I was going to make a purchase on a specific brand website that had a sale. Great. However, the shipping was going to take too long based on where I needed to go, where I am today. It would have shipped it to my other house. Now, well, my house, I'm not in my house. I don't have two houses, just to be clear. So, but I did go to a third-party marketplace and I did buy that brand's product on that site because I also had credit and the shipping was going to be a lot faster. So the balance, yeah, Rodney, I think that what you're talking about is there has to be a certain amount of due diligence when you're in the e-commerce space and you're trying to get lower cost of acquisition and gain customers. Okay, you might gain them from two different places or more, but from a brand perspective, what does that do to your brand? Yeah. And I don't know, maybe Michael, you might have a comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously have first-party sales that are coming through Kobo.com directly. We're working with our partner retailers and their e-commerce presences. And then in some markets, we participate in the marketplaces as well, mostly because we know that for some consumers, that's the only box that they'll do a product search in. However, the platform players are ruthless as well. And we're certainly in one of those categories where Amazon competes directly. And so we've realized over time that at any moment, we are one tweak of a terms of service away from having a business channel shut down, whether that's an app store or a marketplace. Amazon could decide tomorrow that we're really it's gonna be Kindle only in here, and we're gonna clear out everybody else, and there would be nothing that we could do to stop that. So while we participate in those marketplaces, we certainly never let the percentage of sales going through them get above a percentage that we wouldn't be survivable if it went away somehow. And that's true for all of the marketplaces we participate in.
Yeah, that's smart. So having a plan about using them effectively and having some limits on like making sure that those percentages stay high. That's excellent.
And it's tough because they're cheap and easy sales. Like the cost of that individual sale is probably lower than going out and getting one yourself. It comes with a cost of not having a relationship with that customer and not really being able to engage in any follow-up communication with them either.
Yeah, and I imagine it's frustrating too for the brands that you really want to do that post, order feedback loop, right? Hey, Michael, what'd you think about this purchase? And, hey, what about all these other things that you want to sell when you're really boxed in for any one of those marketplace? It becomes the challenge of, how do you, maybe you get the customer that discovers your brand or, your product or makes that purchase, like what Scott did. And then hopefully you get them back, to your site for those ongoing purchases that, whether it's supplies or the follow-up, right? That you continue the relationship someplace off and anywhere but the marketplace.
Yeah, and I think it from a product creation perspective, I think it means having some intentionality around what you're selling, so that essentially embedded in that product, one way or another, there is the creation of that feedback loop. For us, you may get an e-reader through a marketplace, but you still then have to sign up to the store if you want to buy, ebooks to put on it, which is great. So one way or another, we're going to get that connection. It's hard when it's batteries or, certainly when it's commodity products, but even if it isn't. So I think the person who's skilled at trying to manage the pros and cons of those different channels starts to think about product in terms of making sure that one way or another, that connection is going to come to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That totally makes sense. And it kind of it leads into something else that I was thinking about is like so you see we have somebody on our on our brand site, so we've got their attention, whether they're kind of new or existing customer. How do you optimize that experience? It sounds like, Scott, in your example you were giving, they had a sale, they obviously got your attention, but then there was some friction around logistics when you were going to get it. Like it wasn't as easy maybe as you going over to an Amazon. So maybe, Scott, you can maybe start with like some of the differences between kind of new and existing, and then we can throw it around to the panel after that.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Doug. I think, again, putting everything aside, what has been said with obvious consideration, and that this customer has discovered your brand, they are on your site. Let's put the marketplace aside for a moment. Yeah. I think the ease of use the ability to get through that funnel, top all the way down through to checkout, is probably the most important thing. Now, you might be selling widgets. That's fine. Everybody sells a widget. But if you make it a lot easier for them, and there's incentivization to do so, obviously depending on the product, subscription, et cetera, that is at first, I think, the most important thing. Not inundate the customer with a whole bunch of questions up front. I think some services require that, but you have to be you have to do it in a way, obviously, that accounts for both mobile and web. And some cases, obviously, companies have a distinct application, whether it's on a phone or a tablet, what have you. But that user experience better be seamless between all of those devices and act in the exact same fashion. And when you think globally, there's probably a difference in behavior if you look at Asia Pacific versus, let's say, United States or Canada. From mobile perspective, I think you brought that up earlier, Doug. So I think at first, know your audience, who's coming there, what kind of experience do you need to deliver to make it very easy for them to get from the top all the way through to the bottom to checkout. And so that's the new customer. I think the existing customer, you have to be very careful about what you're going to propose to them when they come back to you. I think you need to do some learnings up front. You need to sort of let them sort of self-discover what they're interested in or what they might have an interest in, and you can slowly drip through that process. You need to gather data. I think that's an extremely important thing, not to be invasive, right? But understand what they're looking for, understand their behavior. Did they churn the first time out? Did they click on something and then drop out? Sort of like what I did. So I probably did receive an email from that company, but I probably ignored it. But that's sort of the standard way of doing things. I think there's different approaches today with newer technologies, and when you can bring that customer back if they're an existing customer, and again, incentivize them to come in and engage with your product, whether it's a service or whether it's commodity, whether it's an ebook, whether it's an oven, it could be anything, right? So I think that's the distinct difference between new and existing customers. And just to point out, just to go back to that brick and mortar example, I think you had mentioned that, there's, order online, go and pick up, curbside pickup and all of that. I think today there's a certain amount of expectations by most consumers that these services are just about available everywhere. And so you have to think about the industry that you're in, the service or the product that you are providing or selling, and you have to account for that. You may not have to, do it all at once, but it definitely should be in your strategic plan to do so.
That totally makes sense. Any other panelists have thoughts on that? I know that personally, like part of what you were talking about, Scott, is a little bit around like the idea of like collecting that data, personalization, like, show me things that are relevant to me based on past behavior without being creepy.
Exactly.
Sorry, Rodney, you were going to say something.
I was going to say, Scott, you talk about knowing your audience, right? And I think this is definitely applicable to new customers, possibly customers as well, existing customers. But if you start thinking about shopping behavior types, right? So you think about people that are very product focused, they know exactly what they want, right? So these types of people might want to use the site search capability on the website. But the thing is, I would say many commerce sites today, fail at that, because when someone is searching, I would say almost guaranteed they're not going to get the right result the first time, right? And I think it's a combination of things, is because the customer probably doesn't know exactly how to express what they want in the right way. And then maybe number two, on the brand or company or website perspective, maybe it doesn't have the capability of understanding the context or the intent, right? It's just doing like a keyword match as opposed to understanding the semantics of the query, right? And then if you start thinking about other, shoppers that are just really novice, right, to the topic. So let's just say a first-time homeowner, right, that wants to buy an appliance. They've probably never been in the market before, so they don't even know the first thing of how to, figure out what the right refrigerator is or oven, as you mentioned, right? So maybe, how do we get, these shoppers into a more guided experience where the site could ask questions and answers so that we could learn about the context, understand the needs and the expectations of the customers so that we could then, or brands could then recommend the best product. Like if you think about your experience at a Home Depot or the Brick, where they, and these are all North American retailers, by the way, so sorry for the global audience. But, if you're looking for, a recommendation, you want to turn to a very knowledgeable sales rep, right? That could tell me, right? I could tell them my needs, and then you could rely on their expertise, right? To make sure that they're going to present back the right model for me, right? How do we take that experience onto the website? And I think that's what we need to figure out, how to crack that nut, right? To deliver a really great customer experience for users.
You're getting into like conversational commerce, right?
Yeah.
That's really, AI and ML. So, there are a couple of companies out there that are doing that or trying to crack that nut today. I believe Live Person is one of them. But I think they're only just getting started. And there's a couple of other customer experience platforms that are just coming out, a couple of different startups that are looking at like bringing in, from an e-commerce perspective, making that chat another channel in which you can actually transact. And so that's a part of you, should be a part of somebody's strategy, I think, to Rodney, to your to your point, turning to that knowledgeable sales rep. The knowledgeable sales rep actually becomes that chat on the website or the application. With the proper AI and the proper ML, you can help bring that customer more toward what they're looking for, or at least very close to it.
And I believe that's what Zoovu does, right? I think that's what you guys do. So there you go.
Oh, there you go.
It's a great pitch. Thank you, Scott, for on behalf of Rodney.
Sorry to also mention a competitor, but
Well, and listen, it entirely comes down to the kind of customer problem that you're trying to solve. Like my pandemic purchase was an outdoor pizza oven, and so the place that I went to get it, they have 2 SKUs. Like they're selling big pizza ovens and little pizza ovens. So it's not a search problem. It's not it's not a discovery problem. But I did have 1,000 questions. And so they had obviously put a lot of their time and resources to making sure that they had a person on deck, in chat, ready to facilitate those questions as long as I had them, because the outcome is a multi-$1,000 purchase on the other side. Fantastic. On our side, someone comes to us and we're sitting on this ocean of 7 million SKUs in all of these different languages. And being useful means, how quickly can I get you to something that you actually want for yourself? So we're most like bricks and mortar retail in that first moment that you show up, because we don't know anything about you. We kind of have to lay out a table that's the same as you would if you walked into a Barnes & Noble or an Indigo or anything else. But the minute that we can start getting hints about what preferences and tastes look like, as we can start to look at search, and we can start to look at browsing history, maybe we ask you a question or two, then we're able to start cutting down. And in the course of that, everything that we know about recommendation can kick in behind it. But that's a radically different question to try and answer than big pizza oven, small pizza oven.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you guys are really good at only recommending books with spaceships or giant worms in it to me. So that's, it's like, that's my thing. So great work.
Glad to hear it. If it wasn't, then you have a problem.
Yeah, exactly. No romance novels over here. So I'm gonna change gears a little bit and maybe just talk about, again, as people are going through their digital transformation, they're starting to implement some of these things. Like, Michael, your team has been, doing digital commerce for quite some time. What are some of the the technology that, and again, this is a big question, so we'll try and, keep it to the higher level, but like, what are some of the things from a technology perspective that can either help or hinder these goals we've been talking about? And how do you get around those, and how do you start to make some of those decisions?
I think for us, we're in a very data-rich business. On one hand, knowing what people read provides a lot of insight. And then being in a situation where we have connected devices, we know how people are progressing through their books. So on one hand, there are a lot of data points there. On the other, you can get completely overwhelmed with the sheer amount of stuff coming in. You can essentially end up storing too much. You can find yourself essentially with an unusable superset of data to actually make sense of. So getting good at figuring out what are indicators that can actually get towards someone's taste, that are actually useful in creating recommendation, useful in deciding what facets of search to open up or not open up, becomes the challenge. So half of it's behavioral. What do people want to see, and how do they favorably respond to it? And the other half is a data design, data warehousing challenge of what do you keep, what do you not keep, what sits on the right side of privacy, what sits on the right side of not feeling creepy, and what feels on the right side of utility. Because what we're trying to get to is, oh, this was really helpful. We don't just want to be, kind of a search platform. Books have more emotion to it than that. They're kind of more generally tied to people's feelings of culture and information and education, as opposed to just commerce. We're not selling batteries. Yeah. So the reason that people come back is if they go, oh, I never would have found this before. That's fantastic. I got the right book on spaceships and worms. And awesome. And if we do that well, then we earn the next trip back. And we really do kind of win this, one book at a time.
That's the next title, Spaceship and Worms.
Yeah, exactly. I might just do that for the next talk, just about that.
When I think Michael brings up a very good point about having like this ocean of data and what's usable, what's not creepy, et cetera, but also to facilitate the gathering of that data, to facilitate that particular purchase from an e-commerce perspective. What I have seen, and I had mentioned this at the beginning, I've worked with Brad before, but it's certainly become way more prevalent today than it was even 10 years ago, and that's headless commerce. And I'm not an expert on I'm not an expert on headless commerce. I'm much better in system integration, understanding things of that nature and behavior. But Brad, maybe you could explain a little bit or give an example of how problems can be solved, but also be created when somebody doesn't make the right choice, or they have made the right choice, but they didn't really think it through enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a common, certainly a common occurrence. I mean, what we see from the headless platform perspective, are really sort of two different things. So, and we've kind of touched on them a little bit already. Is the first one is that in most cases there's a sort of a hidden reservoir of data, right? That's sort of locked away in the platform that someone, the marketing team, business analyst, really wants to get their hands on, and they can't. It's, I know it's there. I know the platform knows about it, but I can't get to it. I can't tap into it the way that I want to. Which sort of leads into all the problems that we've already brought up, right? That you're sort of stuck with the opposite problem of having too much data that Michael just mentioned. It's that you don't have enough, and then the other is that there's all these enhancements, these tweaks, these updates that you think about that someone comes up with an idea for on the front end on that experience, to reduce friction, to get the exact design you want, to all those sorts of things that you can't do because the platform is saying hey, you got to work this way. And what ends up happening is in a lot of cases someone gets trapped on either side. Right, a platform gives lots of flexibility on the front end, but on the back end, it's all sort of locked away data, right? And you're just kind of trapped that way. Or the reverse. You've got a ton of API access, but building out the front end is just way overcomplicated. And you end up creating problems that you get yourself sort of stuck in, right? Like a quicksand type of issue. Like you can see where you want to go, but you just can't quite get there. And when you start thinking about going from a company that's growing, that knows its audience, that is selling in multi-channels, or starts to add complexity, right? Because all the things that we're talking about are beyond just setting up a simple store and selling hats and t-shirts, right? It's I want to do really cool stuff, or I want to implement advanced search, or I want to create better relationship with my customers and deliver a really great search experience, all those sorts of things. You can't do if you're sort of stuck in the basics. And I know you've got certainly experience working with Stawall, Scott, and some of the customer service things that come up, right, that can be traps if you get stuck with a platform that's a little bit more rigid.
Yeah, and I would just say that, like, when in my experience and working with you, but also other companies as well, even today, the headless commerce experience matters, because what you're talking about, when whether it's the actual company or the customer and what have you gets trapped on either side of the fence, the platform in and of itself, whether it is Stawall, whether it is something else, needs to be headless for one reason only. That platform needs to be flexible enough to allow your company to scale and pivot if need be. Just as a quick side note, and I won't mention the platform, but it wasn't Stawall. But there are platforms out there where, from a technology perspective, you can upgrade and customize to an extent whereby you paint yourself into a corner. And in this example, a company had taken something off the shelf, customized it to a point where they were beyond the base set of the code. And when a security update came around, they could not update it. So that's another concern. So security is a whole nother topic. Obviously, we're not going to get deep into, but yeah. I think that's one of the reasons why, when you have a very good headless e-commerce platform, you avoid those types of pitfalls.
Yeah, maybe we'll make the next one spaceship worms and security. I don't know if those actually
Sure.
go together, but no, that's awesome. I think just a call out to the audience too. If you do have any questions, we will have time towards the end, so get those in soon, so our team can kind of curate those and get them in order for us. There's new models kind of emerging too. Like we're talking about some of the technology architecture models about headless. Rodney, you were talking about search, and Michael, you were talking about subscriptions and different ways of getting people to interact with your 7 million SKUs and in different ways. So there's always, for any company, there's always going to be is this right for me? Whether it was, years ago, should I have a mobile app or just mobile web? Or, how should I approach this from either a technology or a strategy perspective? How do you decide, and I'll put this out to the group, how do you decide if a trend is right for you or not? Should I go the subscription route? Should I go the mobile commerce route? Let's start with maybe Rodney first. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I've seen some interesting companies coming from my previous background with Whirlpool, because when you think about developing one-to-one relationships with customers, it's figuring out what is the right tools that's going to help nurture these types of relationships. And if you think about Whirlpool, one of the world's leading home appliance manufacturers, very traditional company, but with these times now, with everything being connected, IoT enabled, they're able to launch new platforms and services, that make, buying a Whirlpool product even stickier. So one of the things that they've done, from a mobile standpoint, was acquired a company called Yumly, which is a community recipe app. And what they've done is bake that into some of their hardware, with their appliance products. So not only could you, just find recipes, and develop the ingredients, but it connects into the behaviors on how the product is used, so that you could actually get guided recipes, get some cooking instructions sent to your appliance. And even with some of the recipes, you could generate shopping lists and even process orders, with Instacart or Amazon Grocery. But, I could see how that they've looked at mobile, not just as another tactic, but this is another, way to enrich and deepen that relationship, with customers, because they could, offer, very differentiated services now, right? And they could get into that subscription model, so to speak, because it's not just about buying that one appliance, at one time. They can now subscribe to water filters or replenish their cleaners and things like that. But they definitely made a pivot into not just becoming a manufacturing company, but becoming more a service-based company.
Yeah, subscriptions are fascinating because on one hand, you've got all of these companies who just want to tap into some of that sweet recurring revenue, and on the other hand, it's it's like a Bermuda Triangle of innovators' dilemma. Lots of people selling things one at a time, seeing subscriptions coming for them, and then trying to decide if they really want to punch a hole in their P&L in order to stand a business model like this up. And the best indicator to figure out which side of that you're on is, are you seeing adjacent products going to subscription quickly? And for us, we can see now people who used to buy movies online one at a time are now getting all of the video they could possibly want streaming for $9.99 a month. How long do we actually think they're going to continue to pay $13 for a single ebook? That's a pretty good indicator that steamroller's coming our way. So from that, we've been standing up subscription services, country by country, with huge fights with vendors and suppliers and all of the kind of attendant business model side of it, because there it really is no longer about individual unit margins. It's about trial economics and what's the long-term value of that customer going to be? How much are you going to pay in order to get them in? Engagement is different, conversion is different. You throw out a lot of the traditional e-commerce metrics in exchange for a whole different set of just as important, just as life or death metrics that really only have to do with recurring revenue and subscription models. So it's funny because you do find, and I think even we've found, people who have come up through 10, 15, 20 years of e-commerce experience really struggling with, okay, how do I grow a subscription business? The levers that I used to pull aren't the levers that I pull now. And now I have to do something completely different in order to make this business sustainable. So it's a whole new world, and we're lucky in that we could try it in some markets that weren't core to us first, do a whole bunch of learning, make some mistakes, learn from them, and then start walking it across the different markets that we care about. But when you're a one country, one product player, that's a high stakes game.
It is. And I could say that from experience. And the reality is people, consumers, I call them people, have preferences. So if you look at different types of subscription services, be it Netflix, be it Prime, be it Apple, be it, ebooks, the reality is where subscriptions are going, like the trend, I think, is it's just about in every single industry. It's, from a consumer product perspective, like, consumer packaged goods and things of that nature. So, whether it's feeding your pet, feeding yourself, subscribing on, to a mirror and doing a workout, a Peloton, Echelon, it's sort of endless. I could keep going and watching, TV, almost every single commercial is for an e-commerce play that sells one product And, you might be subscribed to 14 different types of services. So whether they're streamable, downloadable, or actually physical, what's really interesting is when you, they're all subscriptions, but when you get into the actual physical product space, people want their subscriptions when they want them. They want them on a specific day, they want them at a specific time, and they want to make sure that they're in charge of when they're receiving their goods. As opposed to streamable, where you can do it at any time, you can pause it, you can walk away from it. But if you're dealing with something that is perishable, let's say, for example, you want it on that day because you know that you're going to run out of that particular item on that day based on the amount that you've ordered. So whether that's something like Misfits, like, the just as good vegetables and fruits just happen to be damaged and not, store pretty. You get that, and you get that box every 4 weeks on that specific day. And if you don't get it, then you can't cook, or you're out of food, or whatever it may be. So I think that model, to Michael's point, is very difficult to maintain and scale. And I think that goes back to, how do you manage that customer? How do you bring them in? How do you make them engaged? And then how do you bring them back? What if they did have a bad experience? So when you talk about subscriptions, what if somebody just churns out? How do you get them to come back? I think that's something that, if you are considering subscriptions, that comes into play very quickly. And I don't know, Michael, maybe you have a little bit of an idea there in terms of the first time you get that customer. When do you know when that LTV starts to sort of kick in and become, you're a little bit more confident in that LTV and it's recurring?
We went into our first year doing like a wide subscription offering in Netherlands, and as we started it out, we were modeling, assuming that it would completely crater our a la carte business. We just thought we might be writing that whole thing off for years to come. What we found instead was, because we had different product inside subscription and outside subscription, our a la carte business stayed quite stable, and we were picking up a different consumer. The person that we were getting was somebody who had generally found ebooks to be too expensive, or was somebody who saw themselves as a very high frequency reader, who just found the idea of, if they were a person who reads 3 books a week, up until then they'd been using a library or they'd been pirating books. And so we hauled in kind of a different demographic and a different segment of the customer base, and more or less kept the customers that we had before, buying things one at a time. And then there's kind of been some, there's now interplay back and forth. Now we can promote a la carte purchasing to people who are subscribers. We can continue to promote subscriptions to people who are buying things one at a time. So we can, continue to try and move people back and forth across that line.
That's super interesting. Brad, I want to make sure that you get a chance to jump in on this.
Yeah, well, the one thing that Scott brought up that I think is important is, we tend to get asked a lot about subscriptions, especially the last year, in some of the functionality that we have. And one of the questions that always gets brought up is, do you support selling subscriptions? And it's always like, yeah, sure, of course. But the 2 key pieces that get missed, that no one sort of remembers to ask about is, well, how can I manage the subscription? What sort of tools are available to me, either from a customer service standpoint or from the customer's standpoint? When they log into their account area, what do they have, right? Because it's a completely different set of stuff, right? If I'm just selling something and shipping it off, I'm going to log in and view my tracking number, and that's it. The relationship in the subscription is so much broader, and all the things that I might want to do. And to Scott's point about, maybe I want to delay my subscription, maybe I want to pause it, maybe I want to swap different items out, maybe I want to upgrade or down. There's like a whole host of other things to keep in mind. So for a company that we talk about being ready for different business models, and how do you know if you're ready? It's not so much the selling part of it, because it's just another order, right, to send out. It's more so, do you have the customer service tools backing you up, that you can go in when the customer needs to do any of those things, and you can either allow them to do it, ideally on their own, or do you have someone there that's on live chat that's available to pick up the phone, at all hours of the night when, Doug wants to cancel his subscription to the space science fiction book club or whatever that is, that he can do that at 11 o'clock at night, right, and get that done. I think that's the part that's overlooked, because it's not as sexy, right, as the selling and the shipping and all that and that recurring revenue. It's the part that everybody wants to back burner, but at the end of the day, if you get it right, you can really grow that business pretty well.
And I think generally once you get a subscription up and running, the speed with which you can learn and react based on how those customers are behaving, what they like and what they don't like, and especially because you're tuning a fixed revenue model, so little changes can matter a lot. Yeah. But if you've hard coded a bunch of that stuff in, it's like, well, no, I need to move from 1 month's free to 3 months free, but I only want to have 25% of the products in it in the trial period. Like, it's all of that stuff where you can quickly lose your shirt or quickly get yourself to a profitable model if those things are easy to change. So right. I think generally there's that first 12 months are going to be like 1 or 2 months of gathering data, and then tweak as you're trying to get to something that maximizes both retention and margin. And if you can't make those changes quickly, that can be a really expensive 12 months.
Yeah, and I agree, completely agree. I think also setting the expectation to the customer and them fully understanding the subscription that they are enrolled in or about to enroll in, and they might get a discount up front, but then future billing may be more expensive, so you want to give them a view into that as well. Obviously, you don't want to have sticker shock the next time they get billed because you did this huge promo for Mother's Day or Father's Day, at least in the US. So, and then all of a sudden they get their second installment or second, box or whatever it may be. And it's twice the amount now. And what? I didn't think it was going to be that. And so they're setting those expectations. And then the other flip side of that is if they do want to cancel, you have to, you don't want to make it so frustrating that they get so upset that they're definitely never coming back, but you don't want to make it so easy that your churn goes through the roof. That being said, though, there's ways to, if you allow them to self-cancel, implementation of save tactics is extremely important. So when they go to let's say they go to the website or the application and they go to cancel, what type of offers, promotions, or incentivizations can you give to the customer to keep them as a subscriber? And what other learnings can you get? Is there a reason why you're canceling? If there's a specific reason, do you give them a specific promotion? Do you offer them, okay, free box next time, stick around, we'll work through your problems? So you have to be tuned, I think, to Michael's point about learnings and sort of work with that customer directly and ensure that you understand why they would want to cancel, and then hopefully persuade them not to do so.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. So we're running close to the top of the hour. So I want to make sure we do have a couple more questions, but I really wanted to make sure that each of you had a chance to kind of, just some closing remarks as well. So, maybe we can start with Brad. Just, if you had to give one piece of advice to, somebody with an existing site or they're looking to start an e-commerce experience, what would that be? What would be like the nugget of truth? I'll start with you. I'll put you on the hot seat, and then everyone else gets a little bit more time to think about that. But
yeah, I mean, I think the one piece of advice, good question. I think the first thing is, that sort of comes to mind is that whatever someone thinks they're going to build, whether if it's a re-platform, a transformation, or something else, that the speed of change. You sit down today to start building something, in 6 months, well, maybe even 3 months, 6 months, 12 months from now, you're going to be, whatever you thought you were going to build is going to be different, whether that's because the product has changed the market. And then certainly all of the, given where we are, in from our perspective as a headless commerce provider, there are going to be so many services that you're going to want to connect into your platform in some way. It used to be maybe you had like an email service provider, or you had maybe a CRM, and now the scale of that is so much broader. Obviously search is a big deal. Customer data profiles, and who knows what's on the horizon. But the one given is that there's going to be more services, more other vendors that you're going to want to connect into your platform to really help build out that storefront, and provide sort of a better technology set, a better technology stack than where you're at right now, and certainly where you'll be in the future.
Yeah, no, totally. We're seeing a lot of that same trend as well. Michael, I'll pass it over to you in the hot seat. You got a little bit more time.
Wow. Yeah. One thing I would say, if there's one thing that we got right, it was figuring out what we could do that our competitors couldn't. And that's, everybody says that, but we only have 3 competitors. It's Amazon, Apple, and Google. So, what do you do differently than the most powerful e-commerce company in the world, the most profitable hardware company in the world, and the world's biggest search engine? For us, it was finding a different way of acquiring customers. And so if there was one piece of advice, it would be that your channel of customer acquisition and your core business model are existentially intertwined. Virality doesn't really exist anymore. Unmonetized word of mouth doesn't really exist anymore. If you are going to be going out and buying customers on the open market through online marketing, then your business model has to be able to support the amount of margin that's required to buy those customers. If it doesn't, then you either have to find another way to bring those customers in, or pick a different thing to work in, because it's like trying to grow crops without rain. It's just not going to happen.
That's excellent. Thank you, Michael. That was great. Scott, you're on next.
On the hot seat. I agree with both Brad and what Michael had said as well. I think it's all about making sure that if you're not building it yourself, but even if you are, you have to know the solution that you're putting in place is going to allow your company to grow. So you might be an expert at selling widgets, but if you pick the wrong solution to get that in place to grow your company, there's no point. You'll get to a certain point, you might be successful at first, but when you go to scale and you go to grow and you want to maybe pivot and you don't do it correctly, more just sort of going back to the example I brought up before, I think you better partner with somebody who truly understands the business that you're either just starting or getting into and has experience in it, and they want to work with you. I think that's really important. Somebody has to care about what you're trying to do, and you have to pick the right partner and go from there. I think, and again, that's just adding to what I think Michael and Brad said already.
Awesome. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, but I'm biased. So, and finally, Rodney.
Yeah, so I agree with everyone's sentiment, and the one thing I would say is to just genuinely be helpful, right, to customers, because we're already in such a noisy place. They're already overwhelmed with choices. So, how do we make that experience for them finding the information that they need just seamless and easy, right? So that's why I think when you're going to design an e-commerce experience, just be very, purposeful. And if you think about it, everyone here on this panel, we're all e-commerce experts, but more importantly, we're people, right? So we're also buyers, right? Mm-hmm. So we have certain expectations of what we want out of a brand that we purchase from. So I think anyone that's getting into that space of building a commerce experience, and if you are especially in an e-commerce field, step out from that for a second and get into your buyer's shoes and really design, based on that consumer lens, right? And I think, as we, think about how people shop, I'm pretty sure everyone here has a different way of shopping for certain products. So I think with your, as you design these experiences, be very mindful of how you shop how you design for these different experiences. Whether it's someone that knows exactly what they want, or someone that just wants to discover, get inspiration, or someone who just need that little bit of guidance, right? So really put yourself in a customer's shoes.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Rodney. Well, and thank you, all of you. I think I learned a bunch today, which is, I think, Scott, you said it at the beginning. It's like there's a lot to know in the e-commerce space. And if you have any kind of questions after the fact for any of the panelists, please feel free to send it through us at Thrillworks. We'd be happy to connect you and get some answers back. So thank you again to all of you. Really appreciate your time today, and stay safe.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.